Welcome everyone to lesson two for Education for Nepal English Group for 2023 to 2024 session. This is our YouTube channel for past lesson recordings. And today we'll be starting off with computer science and then doing pop culture and then ending off with astronomy. So in today in computer science, we'll be focusing on functions. So the funny thing is that Java does not actually have functions. Java only has something called methods, but methods and functions are actually basically the same thing. The one difference is that a function doesn't need any object and is like object independent, while the method can be like linked to a object. And that's not really important right now. So just basically functions and methods are the same thing in Java. So what is a method and why do we use methods? So a method is a block of code which you have to call on in order to run the code, right? So methods are really useful because if we have a function that we're gonna run multiple times, like let's say we have some math equation we want to do, right? So instead of like copy pasting or typing out the function multiple times, like for every time you want to use it, we can just type it out once inside a method, and then we can just call that method multiple times in order to use the function. So anytime you code in Java, you're actually already using at least one method, and that's because you have to use the main method in order to do anything. Without the main method, you can't do anything in Java essentially. So so if you ever code in Java, you know that whenever you start, you first type in the like public class, and then you would do public static void main string args. That's the main method. The main method is usually what runs like kind of like the most important part of your code. Like let's say if you want to print something or if you want to call other methods, you would usually call them in like the main method. So methods should always begin with private or public, although that's not too important. If you ever forget like the private or public, it's not that big of a deal. But something you cannot forget is the data type that the method will return. So if you forget the data type, then you will have a big error. But if you forget private or public, it's not too big of an issue. So the data type here is not actually the data type of the method because a method is a function. Like it's there to do something. It doesn't have a data type itself. Instead, the method returns a data type. So basically, after the method does a function, does what it's supposed to do, it will return something most likely. And the thing it returns, you have to be able to tell what type of thing it returns. So right here, I have two examples. The one on the left is a void function. So void is special because there is no void data type, right? Like you never ever see someone do void num or like void a or something because that's not a data type. What just means is that it just means nothing essentially. So basically, whenever you have a function that is void, you're not returning anything. Like everything that will happen inside the function. The function will not return anything. So that's why we have no return statement there. But on the right, we have a function that has a data type of integer, right? So then therefore now we have to return something. We have to return a variable or a value that is integer. And if we don't, we'll have an error. And yeah, methods can be pretty much any data type from like Boolean to string to array even. Like you can return pretty much anything, I'm pretty sure. So in order to call a method, you would usually use the method name plus two parentheses, and that would call the function, right? So let's say we have a print function that prints hello, right? So if we call it in the main method, then we'll print hello once, right? If we type print parentheses twice, like one above the other one, then we'll print hello twice, right? And for functions that have a data type that's not void, like if you have a function that's integer or Boolean or whatever, and it returns a value, you have to have a variable or some type of thing like an array or something that can hold the value being returned, right? Because if let's say print is returning the number three, right? But we don't have any variable to hold the number three, then the number three just disappears. Like we can't do anything with it. We have to have a variable to hold the return value. So here, for example, we have integer a equals print. So if print is returning three, then we have integer a equals three, basically. So next we have something called parameters. So methods can pass something back to you, but you can also pass something to methods, and you pass things to methods using something called a parameter, right? So now you can notice that in our method, we no longer just have print parentheses blank, right? Like before, if you noticed over here, it's blank. There's nothing in print. But now we have variables with their data type in print. Okay. So whenever you pass a parameter, you have to pass the data type and the variable name. So we can't just say A or B. We have to say integer A, string B, right? And yeah, you could see how we're passing parameters in the main method is, let's say I have an integer C equals 6, right? Then I can pass C into there, and I'm basically giving 6 to the method. Now the variable name doesn't matter. You can see how I have A, B, C here. So although I'm giving the methods print C, the actual value that it sees is A because in the parameter it says A. So basically C and A are the same thing. So variable name doesn't matter, but the data type matters. Like over on the top, you can see that print and then it says integer A, right? So I have to give it an integer. I cannot give it like a character or like a Boolean value. Like I have to give it a positive number, right? I can't give it like a decimal even. I can't pass 6.6 or 5.3. That would give an error. And same thing with string B. String B, I have to give it a string value, but it doesn't matter what string value I give it or what string variable. Like the variable can be named anything, and then the method would still see it the same. Okay, so one final question is, you guys look at this code here and tell me what does num equal? Basically, what does the variable num equal? Does anyone know the answer to this question? Okay, we have one answer in the chat. It says 11. That's correct. You guys can type your answer in the chat, though I recommend that you guys unmute and say your answer out loud. But yeah, 11 is correct. So that's it for computer science, and now we're moving on to pop culture.
Okay, for pop culture, I'm going to be talking about fast food. Fast food is basically a type of mass-produced food designed for commercial resale. America has many famous fast food chains, including McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, and others. All right, so The fast food industry is very big both in America and abroad. The global fast food industry is worth $907 billion in 2023, while the US fast food industry is worth around 331 billion. There are over 200,000 fast food restaurants in the United States, and around 37% of Americans, or 50 million Americans, eat fast food every day. Okay, we got McDonald's. It's the world's largest fast food chain. It contains 38,000 restaurants in over 100 countries. Primarily serves hamburgers, types of chicken, chicken sandwiches, French fries, soft drinks, shakes, breakfast items, and desserts. It was founded in 1940 in California by the McDonald brothers.
Okay, next we have Subway. So Subway is the second largest fast food chain in the world with around 36,000 restaurants in 99 countries. And they pretty much only serve sandwiches, although they do have some wraps, salads, and drinks. And it was founded in Connecticut, and it has a revenue of $16.1 billion in 2022. So lastly, we have Starbucks, and there's over 35,000 locations. I think that's supposed to be worldwide, actually. And they have a revenue of over $30 billion every year. And it's headquartered in Seattle, Washington, and it's like the most popular slash common like coffee fast food place that you'll ever see. Because I mean, there are other coffee places. And then here's a nice visual map that I found. It's basically showing the number of stores for each fast food chain in the US. And the bigger the square is for the fast food place, that means the more stores there are. So even if you can't see the numbers, you can kind of tell which place has more stores based on how big the square is. So you can clearly see that Subway is the biggest, and then next is Starbucks, and then we have McDonald's. And all the McDonald's are smaller than Starbucks and Subway. It actually makes a lot more money than both of them combined. And then we have like a bunch of random other restaurants, like I mean fast food places. Like you can see Domino's, Pizza Hut, Jack in the Box, and a lot of them are like way smaller than like the big three, I guess, with like Starbucks, McDonald's, and Subway. Okay, so that's it for pop culture, and then here's our final section, astronomy.
All right, for astronomy, we're going to be talking about galactic nebula. A nebula is basically a giant cloud of dust and gas in space. They can form from the gas and dust thrown out when a star goes supernova. Some large nebulae can be a region where stars form, which occurs when the dust and gas in the nebula begins clumping and coming together until it gets large enough to form a star. Okay, so we got the Helix Nebula. It's the nebula which is closest to the Earth, which is around 700 light years. It's a planetary nebula, which means that it's round, and contrary to what the name might suggest, it's not related to planets at all. And it has a radius of about 2.87 light years, or about 19 trillion kilometers. And you can see it in the right. It's got more of a circular shape. I think some people actually might call it like the eye of God, because it kind of looks like an eye. Okay, next we got the Eagle Nebula. It's part of the Serpens constellation and is about 7,000 light years from Earth. It's an emission nebula, which is formed from ionized gases which emit light of various wavelengths. It's famous for the pillars of creation that is part of the nebula and has a radius of 15 light years. And the pillars of creation are very famous. You can see it in the bottom right picture. You may have seen them before. And the actual nebula itself is in the top right. Okay, now we have the Omega Nebula. It's found in the Sagittarius constellation, about 5,000 to 6,000 light years from Earth. It's also an emission nebula, and this one spans around 7.5 light years in radius. And here's some pictures of them. Yeah. Okay. Now we got the Lagoon Nebula. It's also found in the Sagittarius constellation, about 4,000 to 6,000 light years from Earth. It's a emission nebula again, and it spans 21 light years in radius. And you can check out the pictures. There's actually a lot more pictures of all of these nebula. I just tried to find the most interesting looking ones. And yeah, that's about it for astronomy today.
So thank you all for coming. And if you don't have any more questions, feel free to leave. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. We'll put them in the chat.
Hello.